Everyone. Welcome, friends, to the Northern Virginia Baha'i Center Sunday morning program. Please note that the program is being recorded and will be made available on the Nova Baha'i Center website and the Nova Baha'i Center YouTube site. At this time, we would like to remind you that you've been muted to reduce feedback. However, we invite you to enable your camera so that the speaker can see you. You can enable your camera by moving your mouse to the lower left of your screen and clicking on the video camera icon. We will now begin the program with a prayer and devotions.
From it thy radiance, and seek none other than thee. For I have created thee rich, and have bountifully shed my favor upon thee. From it thy radiance, and seek none other than me. For I have created thee rich, and have bountifully shed my favor upon thee.
Our speaker today is Louise Profeit-LeBlanc de Dana. She is a member of the Nacho-Nayak Dun First Nation of Mayo in northeastern Yukon. She is a mother, grandmother, and a story keeper who comes from a long line of traditional storytellers, depicting the morals and teachings of the indigenous stories and how we can all learn to live harmoniously with each other while caring for all living things. She served on the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Canada and lives in Wakefield, Quebec with her husband. Her topic today is Seven Valleys Towards Reconciliation, based on the Seven Valleys of Baha'u'llah. And her talk is about working together toward healing and reconciliation through the teachings of the indigenous people. Welcome, Louise.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Indian Dohoti. In my language, that means, how's the world treating you? I would really like to encourage as many that can possibly do it. I know that sometimes people can't turn their camera on, but I'd like to see who's in my family this morning. Hello. Greetings. There's even some people walking on the street. They have a mask. Good morning. It's my honor, and I'm so happy that I was invited to share with your community, well, and other people's communities this morning from Canada. And I would like to share a prayer in my language. It's actually the remover of difficulties by His Holiness the Bob. Can you hear me okay? All right, that's good. So I'd like to say this little short prayer, remover of difficulties for all of us, so that our internet works, technologies work. You all had your second cup of coffee. Say so. The janik neo tauringiagi hukanujik hida hajuyat ah. Nitru nakashu agio tauringi klahuagi titatnagi kiaki oiki natsat ayat zacho natsat aling. That's an Athabaskan language. My nation is the Nacho-Nayak. That means the people of the big river. So the Nacho, which is now referred to as the Stewart River in English, it flows into the mighty Yukon, which, as you all know from studying geography, particularly of Alaska, you recognize that the river flows out from the Yukon through Alaska into the Bering Sea. So that's just to give you some kind of geographical setting as to where I'm from. It's my honor this morning to discuss something that I think is very important to all of us as Baha'is and non-Baha'is who are with us this morning. How do we reconcile our differences? If we believe in unity, if we believe in the oneness of all humanity, why is it that we're so separated? And in Canada, in 2008, the government of Canada agreed that they would have a commission to determine, to discover all of the sufferings of the indigenous peoples. And this was done through a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And that took a lot of years to come to fruition. All the stories of the people who were removed from their house, from their homes, removed from their parents, and put into residential schools. And the same thing happened in the United States. And so after this occurred, we had a forum in our little community to raise awareness amongst the non-Indigenous community about the importance of reconciliation, the importance of getting to know each other. Unity cannot be established until you get to know each other. You get to know your differences, but also get to know what is the same between us. And of course, as Baha'is, we all believe in one God. And because there's one God, there's only one religion. These are the teachings of Baha'u'llah, and that we are one people. Most indigenous peoples of the world will never say otherwise. We will say we're one family. They have a medicine wheel, and that always depicts the 4 races. From the east, the Asian race, the yellow. From the south, the red represents indigenous people all over Turtle Island in South America and other African countries. And then to the west, we have the color dark blue or black. And this represents the black peoples of the world. And in the north, where the snow comes, this is the white quadrant of the medicine wheel. And we're all one. We're all one family. And so today I'm going to present some quotes. I'm going to present some ideas. And this is an interactive morning. I'm not here as a person who knows everything. I know a little, we all know a little, and we're going to come together and learn more about reconciliation. So I'm going to be asking some people that have showed their faces. I will call upon you to read quotes as we go through the quotes of the slide presentation. Last winter, I was honored to be able to go to another province. Well, that's when we could still travel. In January, the coldest time ever in Alberta, the province of Alberta. And I presented this to the friends. And they were very grateful because every Baha'i community across Canada was made aware through the results of this Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And there were 94 recommendations that came. And people in the Baha'i community were overwhelmed. They said, what can we do? And so I thought that I would remind them that Baha'u'llah has already told us what to do. We have to befriend people. And perhaps these people will be the First Nations people. And so we will we'll also discover and remind ourselves of what the beloved Master said about the indigenous people of the Americas. Oftentimes we forget about that. All right, so are you ready to take a journey with me? That's good. Yeah, I'm going to go to share screen now, and we'll be going through the slides.
Selected.
Thank you. I have my husband here on the side helping me. Okay.
Play.
Now this first image that you see on the screen is where I'm from. This is the Yukon. And these are the mighty Ogilvies. And this was a very precious part of our territory because this was the food basket. This is where thousands of caribou were either going north to Alaska to spend their summer months, and then they returned to the Yukon for the winter. So we're going to take a journey through some of these beautiful valleys that you see here.
Oh,
Okay.
just takes a
Yeah.
while.
Yeah.
Just press it.
Okay. So let's see.
I want to see the name.
I want to see the name. Yes. Thank you. There's no name there. If you put it too far forward, Bob. That's okay.
There's no names.
That's okay. You put it. You took away my other slide, my darling. Trying to get back to the original one. No, that's not it either.
I'm going backwards.
Okay. Anybody on the screen, please, would you kindly read this, and so that we can situate ourselves into which day we are living. Put your hand up and you will be unmuted.
That's good.
Has anybody put their hand up?
I've unmuted Ann Corcoran.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank-
All right, hold on a second. Sorry. Yes, I'm here. This is the day in which God's most excellent favors have been poured out upon men. The day in which his most mighty grace hath been infused into all created things. It is incumbent upon all the peoples of the world to reconcile their differences and with perfect unity and peace abide beneath the shadow of the tree of his care and loving kindness. Baha'u'llah.
Thank you. That was beautifully read. As you can see in this quote from Baha'u'llah, so many years ago, he made mention of reconcile. In Canada, this was a new word for us, reconciliation. Bob, you're making me very nervous. There, it was okay.
Looks like it just takes a long time.
Yeah, it takes about 5 seconds for me to change the slides for some reason. So we're trying to work with this. Now, how do I get these?
Okay.
Okay.
Never mind, don't touch that.
Okay, so this next one tells us again who we are. Baha'u'llah is telling us. Who would like to read this one? Bob, you're making me very nervous.
I'm just staying with you.
Ye are the stars of the heaven of understanding, the breeze that stirreth at the break of day, the soft flowing waters upon which must depend the very life of all men, the letters inscribed upon his sacred scroll. With utmost unity and in a spirit of perfect fellowship, exert yourselves that ye may be enabled to achieve that which beseemeth this day of God. Verily I say, strife and dissension, and whatsoever the mind of man abhorreth, are entirely unworthy of his station. Center your energies in the propagation of the faith of God. Whoso is worthy of so high a calling, let him arise and promote it. Be ye guided by wisdom in all your doings, and cleave ye tenaciously unto it. Gleanings from the writings of Baha'u'llah.
Thank you. In this time when there's so much suffering in the world, we have to remember who we are, and remember also the great responsibility that we have in order to share this knowledge of our oneness with the world. Bob, you took it to another space. Okay. My dear husband is really trying his best to help, but when we hit the button, it doesn't go, and we just have to be patient, friends. So this next one will tell us also. Can you hear us? Hello?
We can hear you, yes.
Oh, my friend, listen with heart and soul to the songs of the Spirit, and treasure them as thine own eyes. For the heavenly wisdoms, like the clouds of spring, will not rain down on the earth of men's hearts forever. And though the grace of the all-bounteous one is never stilled and never ceasing, yet to each time and era a portion is allotted and a bounty set apart, this in a given measure. When I first read this passage from Baha'u'llah, it really resonated with my indigenous roots, because indeed we have songs of the heart. We praise God through many of the songs as well as dances. And this particular quote also makes reference to this, the clouds of spring, they only come once in the spring, and these rain down on the earth forever. So it's just something for us to consider. I'm going to the next slide.
I believe Gossamer
Yes.
has her hand up to read if you would like someone else to read.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Be a refuge to the fearful. Bring ye rest and peace to the disturbed. Make ye a provision for the destitute. Be a treasury of riches for the poor. Be a healing medicine for those who suffer pain. Be ye doctor and nurse to the ailing. Promote ye friendship and honor and conciliation and devotion to God in this world of non-existence. Abdu'l-Baha.
Again, there's the word without the re, the word conciliation. So promote this friendship and honor and conciliation. I took that from the master. I think the other aspect of reconciliation is, and we all know this as Baha'is, is that what is the purpose of justice? This word is being bandied around a lot these days, particularly with all of the trials and woes that are going on, particularly in your country, but as well as in our country. There's a lot of people who have been oppressed who are seeking justice. And what is the purpose of justice? I think when we're considering reconciliation with those who have been oppressed by the majority of the people, or people of color who have been oppressed, Baha'u'llah is very clear the type of justice that we have to pursue. He said that the purpose of justice is to attain unity. And he said that the light of men is justice. Quench it not with the contrary winds of oppression and tyranny. I think he was giving us a warning here. And again, the purpose of justice is the appearance of unity amongst men. The ancient beauty hath in his sacred tablets explicitly written that the day of their abasement is over. His bounty will overshadow them, and this race will day by day progress and be delivered in from its age-long obscurity and degradation. And this is from the beloved Abdu'l-Baha, in making reference to the fact that we should teach the indigenous peoples of the Americas. This is quoted by Shoghi Effendi in Advent of Divine Justice. I really appreciated this quote so much when I was a new Baha'i, when I read that the ancient beauty in his sacred tablets wrote that this day of our abasement is over, and that his bounty will overshadow them, and this race will day by day progress and be delivered. This really lifted my heart. Abdu'l-Baha also talked in making reference to Canada, and as you know, Abdu'l-Baha did visit Canada, and he in fact stayed with one of his apostles, May Maxwell, and her husband, Sutherland Maxwell, and of course, eventually their beautiful child, Rihia Khanum, who everybody knows. And he spoke to the future of Canada. And I know that when I first served on the National Spiritual Assembly of Canada, this quote would ring daily in my mind. The future of Canada, whether from a material or spiritual standpoint, is very great. Day by day, civilization and freedom will increase. And I think that people from the United States, our brothers and sisters just south of us, this also is in reference to your society. Here are some dear friends. These are elders from a beautiful community on the north shore of the great St. Lawrence River. So Candace, would you kindly read this important quotation so that we can understand now where we're going to be taking our journey into the arena of reconciliation? Somebody will have to unmute Candace. Thank you.
Attach great importance to the indigenous population of America, for these souls may be likened unto the ancient inhabitants of the Arabian Peninsula, who, prior to the end of Muhammad, were like unto savages. When the light of Muhammad shone forth in their midst, however, they became so radiant as to illumine the world. Likewise, these Indians, should they be educated and guided, there can be no doubt that they will become so illumined as to enlighten the whole world. Abdu'l-Baha, Tablets of the Divine Plan.
Thank you, Candace. That was read so beautifully. So what does this mean? As an indigenous person, I always say to myself and to my friends, what does this mean? Should they be educated and guided? That there can be no doubt that they will become so illumined as to enlighten the world. This is what we have to begin to understand more clearly as we walk towards reconciliation of what historical events happened in both the United States and Canada regarding the removal of children from their homes of their parents. So we're not, this is from the National Spiritual Assembly of Canada, made a submission to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 2013. Is there someone here that can read this beautiful quote from our institution of the Assembly of Canada?
The process of reconciliation is aided by magnanimity on the part of all concerned, perpetrators, victims, and even newcomers, all in Canada who have to learn to live together, without forgetting the injustices of the past. We need a sense of solidarity and resolve as we face the present and the future together. This may be helped by expressions of forgiveness on the part of the victims, although no one has the right to require this. Without erasing the memories of past injustice and pain, forgiveness can be a gesture of magnanimity and resilience that reinforces the nobility and courage of those who have suffered. It requires engaging with one another in a spirit of selfless love, where misunderstandings are overcome through patient and respectful dialogue, and cultural differences provide an occasion to learn from one another. Shut your eyes to estrangement, then fix your gaze upon unity. Rather, our hearts should burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. From the National Spiritual Assembly of Canada, submission to TRC, September 20th, 2013.
So that was 7 years ago, friends. Much has happened in this country. Beautiful things are beginning to occur. I've noticed in the last 7 years, this re-advancement of culture from all the different nations, the revival and the enrichment of language, of arts, of even the original indigenous sciences of how to take care of the land. It is a beautiful thing that was spearheaded by the Truth and Reconciliation. So the Indigenous people of Canada had that moment to express their story of what happened, what occurred in our country, that so many newcomers, so many people who have lived in this country for generations had no idea of. And this allowed some of the healing to occur amongst the population. So Baha'u'llah says again in the Kitab-i-Igan, we're going into the first valley. Remember, I made reference to these valleys. When we want to reconcile our differences, when we want to reconcile the possibility of getting to know somebody, what do? The first valley, of course, is we have to seek out truth. And we're heading into this valley of truth, valley of search. He said, only when the lamp of search, of earnest striving, of longing desire, of passionate devotion, of fervent love, of rapture and ecstasy is kindled within the seeker's heart, and the breeze of his loving kindness is wafted upon his soul, will the darkness of error be dispelled, the mists of doubts and misgivings be dissipated, and the light of knowledge and certitude envelop his being. So we have to search for more truth. We have to search ourselves for our own truth, and we have to search for ways and means of how we can interact with people who have suffered. I'm not going to read all of these quotes, but we are going to be focusing on a few that I'd like you to express what your thoughts are about them. So can somebody read this first one at the top, please? Candace, thank you.
God has created in man the power of reason, whereby man is enabled to investigate reality. God has not intended man to blindly imitate his fathers and ancestors. He has endowed him with mind or the faculty of reasoning, by the exercise of which he is to investigate and discover the truth. And that which he finds real and true, he must accept. He must not be an imitator or blind follower of any soul. He must not rely implicitly upon the opinion of any man without investigation. Nay, each soul must seek intelligently and independently, arriving at a real conclusion and bound only by that reality. Abdu'l-Baha, The Propagation of Universal Peace.
So friends, we are in the second valley. We're beginning our search for truth, the truth from our own minds. And we're now beginning to acquire knowledge. Just some of the facts that I've shared with you this morning is part of your knowledge base now. And so this is the second valley that we're going into. So this is a very important one, because what we're establishing here on the planet, the Baha'is have this great privilege, this honor and great responsibility, is to establish a new civilization in which every person's gifts, every person's strengths, every person's wisdom, knowledge, based on the most recent divine knowledge, will help us establish. So God has given us eyes that we may look about us at the world and lay hold of whatsoever will further civilization and I can't read the other word there. He has given us ears that we may hear and profit from the wisdom of scholars and philosophers, and arise to promote and practice it. Senses and faculties have been bestowed upon us to be devoted to the service of the general good, so that we, distinguished above all other forms of life for perceptiveness and reason, should labor at all times and along all lines, whether the occasion be great or small, ordinary or extraordinary, until all mankind are safely gathered into the impregnable stronghold of knowledge. We should continually be establishing new bases for human happiness and creating and promoting new instrumentalities towards this end. How excellent, how honorable is man if he rises to fulfill his responsibilities. How wretched and contemptible if he shuts his eyes to the welfare of society and wastes his precious life in pursuing his own selfish interests and personal advantages. Abdu'l-Baha is such a kind teacher. He takes us through all of these things. He talks to us about all the different aspects of knowledge. And he indicates, and he also comforts us, and that this is a stronghold of knowledge that we need here in the world. But all humanity has to be safely gathered together under this divine tent, if you will. Okay. Do I have another reader? Please. Hello?
I am the sun of wisdom and the ocean of knowledge. I cheer the faint and revive the dead. I am the guiding light that illumineth the way. I am the royal falcon on the arm of the Almighty. I unfold the drooping wings of every broken bird and started on its flight.
So powerful. This is from the Tablet of Unity. So we are now in the third valley, which is the Valley of Unity. We then go from the search, we go through these different valleys, the Valley of Search, the Valley of Knowledge, and we're now going into the Valley of Love and Unity. I'm not going to read all of these quotes again, as I said, but I think the last one is very important. He said, "In the world of existence, there is indeed no greater power than the power of love. When the heart of man is aglow with the flame of love, he is ready to sacrifice all, even his life." Can anybody read this beautiful quote about love? It's what makes everything come together in the world. Let's hear a man's voice. Is there any men out there that can read? Please.
When we observe the phenomena of the universe, we realize that the axis around which life revolves is love, while the axis around which death and destruction revolve is animosity and hatred. The proof is clear that in all degrees and kingdoms, unity and agreement, love and fellowship are the cause of life, whereas dissension, animosity, and separation are ever conducive to death. Therefore, we must strive with life and soul in order that day by day, unity and agreement may be increased among mankind, and that love and affinity may become more resplendently glorious and manifest. From Abdu'l-Baha, The Promulgation of Universal Peace.
So the whole universe is dependent upon this wonderful aspect of every human being has that in ourselves, is to love. This is so exciting. This one really needs to be meditated upon. If we look out at nature and recognize that everything in this universe, everything on this earth, the axis of all life revolves around love, the love of the Creator for us. So that's the Valley of Love. Service in love for mankind is unity with God. He who serves has already entered the kingdom and is seated at the right hand of his Lord. So all of you friends who are doing service in some capacity, even coming to these devotionals, we're asked to participate in whatever means we can to be together, to strengthen ourselves so that we can better serve humankind. That's the Valley of Love. So we have searched, we've acquired knowledge, we have found that the most powerful force on the planet is love. And now we're heading into this very important valley, and we've been up a mighty mountain of love, and we're heading into this Valley of Unity. Can somebody read the second and the last well, actually you can read all three of those. From ye are the fruits of one tree, and then the last one is consort with the followers of all religions.
Ye are the fruits of one tree and the leaves of one branch. Deal ye one with another with the utmost love and harmony, with friendliness and fellowship. He who is the day star of truth beareth me witness. So powerful is the light of unity that it can illuminate the whole earth. This is from Epistle to Son of the Wolf. The earth is but one country and mankind its citizens. Tablets of Baha'u'llah, Lohe Maqsood. Consort with followers of all religions in a spirit of friendliness and fellowship. Tablets of Baha'u'llah, Bisharat.
This is the pivotal valley. And it's the valley that we have to really get used to, that we have to be able to really master if we want to reconcile our differences. And we all have differences. This was taken last summer in the North Shore of the St. Lawrence River, and this is really a symbol of unity, intergenerational, indigenous people with non-indigenous people, but these were the youth that committed themselves to being the fire keepers of the message of Baha'u'llah. I thought you would enjoy to see this beautiful picture. Again, the purpose of justice is to attain unity. I think that we've already read this particular quote, but I wanted to show you this picture because in Canada, and I know that from my own research, the number of missing and murdered Indigenous women is astronomical. And we're not sure where these women are going. And the law enforcers cannot investigate quick enough as to those that are still missing. And I thought that this beautiful photograph of these women taken at the Museum of History should be shown to you. Strong women in the Indigenous community. Now, the Guardian is very instructive. He gives us such guidance as to how to connect, how to interact, how to ensure that the Indigenous people of the Americas receive this priceless gift in a way in which they will not throw out their foundational religions and spiritual practices. So it's kind of a warning, I thought, and this was written by Shoghi Effendi in 1947 to all the Baha'is of the West, and of course we live in the West. He said, nor should any of the pioneers at this early stage in the upbuilding of Baha'i national communities overlook the fundamental prerequisite for any successful teaching enterprise, which is to adapt the presentation of the fundamental principles of their faith to the cultural and religious backgrounds, to the ideologies and the temperament of the diverse races and nations whom they are called upon to enlighten and attract. The susceptibilities of these races and nations, differing widely in their customs and standards of living, should at all times be carefully considered and under no circumstances neglected. And if you read this beautiful compilation, it's called A Special Measure of Love. And it's a compilation of many of the writings from Shoghi Effendi about teaching of indigenous peoples. So I've just did a little what are you doing, Bob? I wanted to do a little comparison, I suppose, between the original teachings of the indigenous peoples and the Seven Valleys and how I juxtaposition them. So they all go together. One of the grandfather teachings of the indigenous people is respect. Respect for the Creator. Respect your own self, your life. Respect your family. Respect your community. Respect your nation. Respect the world. And we have to understand that in order to do this search for ways and means to approach the indigenous community, to search for ways to do that, we have to acquire a great respect. The second is courage. And I always say that courage, it takes courage to love. So I just put these juxtapositions together. Respect in order to search, courage in order to love. We must also be very truthful. And this is one of the grandfather teachings again. If you're truthful, you will acquire knowledge. True knowledge is based on investigation of truth for oneself. Again, in the grandfather teachings, we also have the teaching of love. But love results in unity. And if we're honest, this is a great teaching of the indigenous people, is this honesty. When we're honest, we're always content because we know that what we're saying is the truth. And all of these teachings at the top will result in wisdom. And as Baha'u'llah informs us to do in the Valley of Search, he said to search out wisdom. And once you acquire this spiritual knowledge and wisdom, you're full of wonderment. And sometimes, you know, as Baha'is, maybe we're too full of wonderment. We have to have a greater sense of humility. And the last valley, of course, is when we can attain that true poverty and absolute nothingness. So here's another letter written by Shoghi Effendi. This was written actually to the Spiritual Assembly of Canada. It said, the work being done by various Baha'is, including our dear Indian believer who has returned from the United States in order to pioneer amongst his own people in teaching the Canadian Indians, and I want this to be emblazoned in my mind, is one of the most important fields of activity under your jurisdiction. The Guardian hopes that ere long, many of these original Canadians will take an active part in the Baha'i affairs and arise to redeem their brethren from the obscurity and despondency into which they have fallen. You can find that letter online from Shoghi Effendi. This is, again, after the master has informed the people that we should teach the indigenous people of the Americas, Shoghi Effendi again strengthens that, reminds us. You know, it's so interesting when I hear the news from our brethren in the United States, I rarely hear about indigenous people. And it's not, I'm not sure how that happened, or whether or not anything that's going on is not exciting enough to be on the news. But what I do know is that throughout the COVID period, a lot of indigenous people are suffering tremendously from COVID and from isolation. So perhaps we can hear Shoghi Effendi tell us, he said he's most anxious for the message to reach the Aboriginal inhabitants of the Americas. He said, these people, for the most part, downtrodden and ignorant, should receive from the Baha'is a special measure of love, and every effort be made to teach them. Their enrollment in the faith will enrich them and us, and demonstrate our principle of the oneness of man far better than words or the wide conversion of the ruling races ever can. Cameron, do you want to read the top one there, please?
Sure. The Master has linked the Indians in your countries to the early Arabian nomads at the time of the appearance of Muhammad. Within a short period of time, they became the outstanding examples of education, of culture, of civilization for the entire world. The Master feels that similar wonders will occur today if the Indians are properly taught and if the power of the Spirit properly enters into their living. He attaches should I go further?
Yes, read the second one too, please, Karen. Thank you.
Sure. He attaches the greatest importance to this matter as the Master has spoken of the latent strength of character of these people and feels that when the spirit of the faith has a chance to work in their mind, in their midst, it will produce remarkable results.
I must say, friends, when I first read this, and I was a very new Baha'i, I cried. For everything that was taken, now we had a job to do. Like the plow in a garden, in a field, it has to be dug deep in order for good plants to grow. And so I started to understand that there was a reason for all of our suffering, so that we could better serve the cause of Baha'u'llah. Be generous in prosperity and thankful in adversity. Be worthy of the trust of thy neighbor and look upon him with a bright and friendly face. Be a treasure to the poor, an admonisher to the rich, an answer of the cry of the needy, and a preserver of the sanctity of thy pledge. Friends, I'm sure you all know this beautiful quote. I think that this is our working order. This is how we should be with all people. Be a home for the stranger, a balm to the suffering. So remember we were in the valley? What's our next valley? If we seek out truth, we find knowledge. We begin to love our responsibility before Baha'u'llah. And we move into this beautiful valley of unity. Unity with God, unity with the teachings of Baha'u'llah, unity with all of our family of mankind. So we move into this next valley, and it's not to say that we just have to sit back and be content. Well, our job is done. No. Contentment is to see life as a perfecting process rather than a goal. He says, O Son of Spirit, ask not of me that which we desire not for thee. Then be content with what we have ordained for thy sake. For this is that which will profit thee, if therewith thou dost content thyself. Can we have somebody read the last paragraph in the Words of Wisdom, what Baha'u'llah informs us?
The source of all good is trust in God, submission unto his command, and contentment with his holy will and pleasure. The source of all glory is acceptance of whatsoever the Lord hath bestowed, and contentment with that which God hath ordained.
So we become content with how we're starting to be more understanding of people around us. We move from there into this amazing valley of wonderment. We wondered why we didn't see it before, I'm sure. Like, why didn't we understand that this is a process? Reconciliation is a process. It's not a straight line. We might have to go back and do some more search. We might have to acquire more knowledge. We might have to become more loving. We might have to really meditate on this whole condition of unity. But in this valley, he says, in the valley of wonderment, the seeker is struck dumb by the beauty of God. The seeker becomes conscious of the vastness and glory of creation and discovers the inner mysteries of God's revelation, being led from one mystery of creation to the next. It is explained that the seeker continues to be astonished by the works of God. Once we finish the last valley, the valley of absolute poverty, and absolute nothingness, we're going to have a discussion about what does that mean? What do all these things mean? These valleys. So it's the soul that travels through these valleys. And this is a sign of God. Know verily that the soul is a sign of God, a heavenly gem, whose reality the most learned of men has failed to grasp, and whose mystery no mind, however acute, can ever hope to unravel. This is exciting. The soul, he says, is the first among all created things to declare the excellence of its creator, the first to recognize his glory and cleave to his truth, and to bow down in adoration before him. If it be faithful to God, it will reflect his light and will eventually return unto him. Again, this is this valley of wonderment where everything is being tossed around. At every moment he beholdeth a wondrous world and new creation. Somebody should read this one because we can always meditate and reflect on this particular quote from Baha'u'llah. Somebody there can read this, please? You are a quiet bunch.
Okay, thank you. Dost thou reckon thyself only a puny form, when within thee the universe is folded?
Yes. How powerful is that? How wonderful You know, from the Valley of Wonderment. How wonderful that we recognize what a gift God has given us. Dost thou recognize thyself only a puny form, when within thee the universe is folded? And this is a promise. This is a promise of Baha'u'llah. Now, this is a beautiful photograph, of course, of the International Teaching Center in the Holy Land. I put that in my photos too. And we're going to go into this valley of true poverty. The final valley is a valley of true poverty and absolute nothingness. It is the furthermost state that the mystic can reach. The seeker is poor of all material things and is rich in spiritual attributes. The station is the dying from self and the living in God, the being poor in self and rich in the desired one. Poverty, as here referred to, signifies being poor in the things of the created world, rich in the things of God's world. For when the true lover and devoted friend reaches to the presence of the beloved, the sparkling beauty of the loved one and the fire of the lover's heart will kindle ablaze and burn away all veils and wrappings. Yea, all he hath from the heart to skin will be set aflame, so that nothing will remain save the friend. So this is our journey, friends. Just trying to stop the share so we can have a conversation. I'll have to call on my husband now to help me get out of here. Oh. I wrote this poem in 2019, last year, with regards to reconciliation. I'll just read it quickly for you. And I'm sure that with everything going on in the world right now, you can all understand the turbulence of all of the forces of darkness, but also these great forces of light. Okay. I wrote this poem and it's called Swimming in Turbulent Waters. We're all standing on the shores of turbulent waters. We have to now become courageous enough to swim towards the middle of the river, to be prepared even to drown in that middle together, learning how to navigate this unknown current, learning by keeping our heads up. So friends, that's the end of the sharing. And I'm sure that you have some questions.
Louise, dear Louise, such a wonderful, fantastic presentation. I must say I'm enlightened by how you conducted this presentation. I guess from your background and cultural background, how would you characterize the indigenous culture aligning with these seven valleys? Are they spiritually in line with these valleys, or where do they land?
Yes, absolutely. And it wasn't until I started to do my own research, because I just fell in love with the valleys, I created some art pieces. And these art pieces were made out of caribou hide. And I've called them now, they are actually little lamps, spirit lamps. But yes, I think that the teachings within the indigenous community, all our lives, we are searching for truth. Truth, love, that unity. Knowledge is a lifetime thing, as are the seven valleys. We spend our whole lives in one of those valleys, It's not a linear thing. So I was able to take these beautiful valleys with the art and put them into an exhibition and teach people about spiritual journeys. So yeah, they're totally in line with the indigenous teachings. They have to be. They're from God. I hope that answers your question. Emmanuel, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. For years, I had the difficulty to really understand the Seven Valleys, which, I mean, if you are not familiar with them, and when you are on your own to try to understand, it's pretty difficult, but you make it so clear. I mean, it's wonderful. Now I have a much better understanding of the Seven Valleys. But I also wanted to make a comment about one of the quotes that we read. It says, well, when the indigenous people will be educated and guided, and I think it can be understood in an ambivalent way. I mean, I don't think it means, well, we are superior to those people and we have to educate them and guide them. I mean, it's not about colonialism.
No.
Because I have some very good friends, native Hawaiians, friends in Hawaii, and they have really similar spiritual understanding of the world, like the Native Americans on the American continent. And I mean, their spiritual understanding is so similar to the Baha'i faith.
Yes.
As the spiritual understanding of the Native Americans is. And I think, I mean, when I try to understand their spiritual knowledge, there is an understanding in their faith that at one point in the future of our history, human history, humanity will come back to the values of the Native American peoples, the Polynesians, all those indigenous civilizations. And so I think when in that quote they say, well, let's educate, guide those people, I think it's because in a certain way, the indigenous people might have lost some of the understanding of their true spiritual beliefs. And it's not, I mean, teaching them in a colonialist way. It's just bringing back all the spiritual goodness that they already have in their civilization. So, it's, I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you. Thank you. I struggled with that particular quote when I was a new Baha'i as well. But now I have come to realize that it's up to myself to educate myself, and it's up to myself to take the guidance, the most recent guidance to the world from Baha'u'llah. But that doesn't mean to say that I can't go deeper in my understanding of the traditional teachings, because they're married. And so thank you so much for bringing that to all of our attention, because sometimes indigenous people, because we have been oppressed, sometimes that might, set us off and say, well, these people, like you said, with the colonial ideas, but this is the education and guidance of freedom of religion, freedom to develop your spiritual strengths, whether it's from the traditional form, but also, and I remember one of the counselors told me that it is the robe of Baha'u'llah that you put around your teachings, not the other way around. You have to put his robe around to protect the goodness of those original teachings. That's the way I look at it. Today, anyway. Maybe next week I might have learned more. Thank you.
There's a private question in the chat box, thanking you for the presentation. And they say, you shared a picture of the beloved youth called the Firekeepers.
Yes.
And I ask, what does it mean, and what role do youth play in the reconciliation process and bringing about peace and justice for the future?
Well, I belong to a group of people, and there's only 2 indigenous people, and there are 4 non-indigenous people. And you know, from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, there were 94 recommendations. And when we had a forum, which I helped to organize with our local spiritual assembly and other people who had interest in reconciliation, there's 94 of these recommendations, and they're in the field of education, in the field of health, in the field of care, land, all of these kind of different things, law, anything that would impact indigenous communities today. And so my response to that is, they said, we feel so overwhelmed. I said, pick one, any one, and work on it. So if you're already in the field of education, invite indigenous people into your classroom to explain to them certain aspects of your teachings, your culture. As a storyteller, I try to go to as many schools. Well, I can't now, but I'm on several Zoom platforms as a storyteller, and I share traditional stories. And then I ask the people, what are these teachings? I try and practice throughout my daily life to be non-prejudicial to whatever nation comes my way. I try to be a Baha'i. This is how I encourage reconciliation. I try to be the best Baha'i I can be. Help people to learn how to consult. Help people to learn to be, you know, more constructive. You know, people want to be full of resilience, but they get into these conditions where they are more angry and destructive instead of constructive. So those are some of the ways in which I'm familiar with, and I'm able to help people through this process towards reconciliation. Was there another question in the chat?
I don't see any more questions in the chat. People thanking you for the presentation. If there are any more questions, I believe participants are still able to unmute themselves. If you would like to unmute yourself and ask a question.
Louise, it would be
Yes.
wonderful to hear a story.
You do, eh?
Yeah.
You sound like my husband. He just thinks we can tell a story just like on a dime. Let me think for a second, okay? I can share. You know, there's a beautiful teaching that has its commonality within the Baha'i teachings, is that we should never take people's belongings without their permission. We should never just go into somebody's house and help ourselves. We should seek permission. You know that teaching? You know, we're not supposed to just go next door and bore somebody's lawnmower or take their boat and take off. So I'll tell you this. I'm seeking my mind for a short story because I recognize the time of the day, And for other people who are on other Zoom sites, you know, it does get tiresome for a lot of you right now. So this is a story from my grandmother. And she was born in the mid 1800s. Her parents and her grandmother used to travel, you know, nomadically. They just traveled in small groups. And so she traveled with her mother and her father and her grandmother, her grandma. And they used to go fishing in the Nacho, the big Stewart River. And they went to the same place every year to catch salmon. They would make fish traps or make a net and they would catch fish. And for a couple of years, a man came by. He was French. And he spoke French. And my grandmother really surprised me once because she picked up some words from him. She said, yeah, I don't know why. She said, you know, white man, they always got to say thank you. Why you say thank you? Somebody does something for you, you have to find a way to do something for them. That's how we say thank you. Like we didn't have a word for thank you. You show your thank you. You show your appreciation. So she said, yeah, that man, he say, merci bucket, which he interpreted from merci beaucoup. So she would use the word merci bucket. And she said, and he always say, please. What's that? In the tradition of my people, you don't beg somebody to give you something. She looked at the word please as begging. You know, we should all be such noble people that we shouldn't have to ask. People will just give it to you. So she said, he always say that. S'il vous plaît, she said. S'il vous plaît. I got a couple of French words, she told me. So can imagine yourself on this riverbank years ago. And my grandmother, she said maybe I was about 7 or 8 years old at the fish camp. And Frenchie, she said, I don't know his real name, but he's from France. And he's a Frenchman. So my dad called him Frenchie. Frenchie always come to visit my dad. They like to smoke pipe. Frenchie always got tobacco. And they enjoy each other's company. And one year, Frenchie stopped by that would have been my great-grandparents' home. They lived in a caribou hide tent on the banks of the Nacho. And Frenchie dropped by. And by then my grandma said, he started to understand our language. And he made it clear to my great-grandfather that his mother was old and she was in France. He said, I'm going to go see my mother. She's not doing well. She's getting too old. So I'm going to go by boat or go back to France. And my grandma said, of course, my dad was worried. He just has a little small canoe and he's going to go on big water. So she was worried about him, I guess. My grandmother was worried about my grandpa's friend, and my grandpa was worried about him too. He said, no, I'm going to take a big boat. Oh, okay. He said, and I'll see you next spring. He said, you watch for me. He said, when the ice all breaks up on the river, he said, I will come and visit you. He said, I hope so. So when they went down to say goodbye to Frenchie, he was getting in his little canoe. My grandma said, I think my dad thought that's the last time he's going to see Frenchie. He waved to him We don't have a word for goodbye. We just wave, we say, see you later, either in this world or the next, right? We just say, see you. So I guess the winter went by, and here's a huge breakup. You know, when the ice breaks up in those big rivers in the Yukon, it makes such a roaring sound, and the ice is moving all over. The water is just gushing over. Sometimes it even causes a little flood because of the ice jams. But after all the water had cleared itself of ice, there was about a week later, my grandma said, we were down at the bank of the river. We saw a little boat coming, little canoe. Frenchie. Oh boy, my grandpa was so happy, I guess. So they all went down to the riverbank to bring his stuff up. They were so glad and happy to see that he survived the winter and that he went to France. Well, they brought up his backpack, and he opened it up after he had something to eat, you know. My ancestor fed him, and then after supper, him and my grandpa, they light up their pipe. He said, well, I brought you something from France, he said. And he opened up his pack. The first thing he pulled out was for my great-grandpa, a knife, a real steel knife. And as you know, this tool is very important for survival in the North, in any kind of bush life. He pulled out the knife and he gave it to my great-grandpa. Until that time, my grandpa only used stone knife made out of obsidian. That's very sharp too. Out of copper, they made knives out of copper and out of bone. But this was a real steel knife. My grandma said, yeah, you could sharpen that. You could sharpen that one. Oh, my great-grandpa was so happy. He said, Masi bucket to the Frenchman. Then he dug around in the pack. The next thing he brought out was for my great-grandma. He brought out a copper pot. They used to call this a copper kettle. It's got a handle on it, copper. Well, that was for my great-grandma. She saw pots, you know, in different people's camps, but she didn't have her own pot. So when they had to cook their food, they cooked it around the fire pit. They would take willows like this and spread meat out or fish and prepare the food that way. She always wished for a pot. If you wanted to make soup and boil meat, you would take the stomach of the animal and you would cut the meat up and put it into the stomach, which is a long, encapsulated like a bag, the stomach bag of a large animal. Make a fire, and when the fire died down, there's just hot coals there. You would take that stomach, put the meat in there, put some water in there, and make a tripod over that fire pit, which has the hot coals. And you would get a little hook with a willow, and you would attach the stomach, and the stomach would turn around like this over the fire pit. Pretty soon, the heat from the hot coals would start the water boiling in that stomach bag. Would boil. After it's cooked, they would take it down. They would drink the soup, eat the meat, and eat the pot. Because that stomach is good to eat too. The only thing is that you can't use that kind of a pot twice. You can only use it once. So here she had a pot. I'm very grateful. And the next thing you know, my grandma said he was digging around in his bag again. And she said, I was very curious. And according to our teachings, you know, young women are very protected, especially from older men. Even your own brother, you would, if your brother was much older than you wouldn't talk with them. It's just a teaching to protect the girl child. So Frenchie dug around in the bag and he pulled something out and he wanted to give it to my grandma. My grandma said, I ran behind my grandma. I don't want it. Because she said, I have these teachings. I must not talk to him. I have no right to talk to him. And my grandma said, no, he don't understand our way. So she said, I approach him I'm very shy. She said, I approach him and I was very humble about it. And I opened it up and what was in there? A pair of shoes. Blue leather shoes. How he know my size? She said. I put it on, it just fit perfect, she said. How he know? I'm so happy. I never wear shoes. I wear moccasin. I got spring moccasin, summer moccasin, fall moccasin, and winter moccasin. I never wear shoe with leather. It's a navy blue leather with little buttons down the side from France. Well, my cousin, she lived right next door in a tent too. Her name is Natua. You know what Natua means? Water on the face. Crybaby. Natua means crybaby. So she said, I went outside to show off my shoes, she said. I called to her, Natua, huh? Look what I got. How come I didn't get any? So she cried her head off. Oh, my grandma felt so bad. Because according to our teachings again, if you came to my house and you saw this lovely little pot here and you made a remark about it, you said, oh, that's so beautiful. I like that. When you leave, I have to give it to you. Why? It's to prevent greed. And this is how you show your hospitality, your generosity. So when Natua cried for those shoes, my grandma was in a dilemma, a traditional teachings dilemma. She was at the crossroads. So she went and consulted with her grandma. And my great grandma said, you don't have to, because Frenchie doesn't understand our way. You better not. He might think we're insulting him. So she kept those shoes. That night she slept, it was in the springtime, and she tried to sleep closer to the entrance so little breeze can come in the tent so she can stay cool. She said, I had my little bedroll and I took those little shoes off. She said, I want to jump into them right away when I wake up. She said, I even take the dust off with a little bit of spit, she said. She said, I sleep that night. In the morning when I woke up, she said, I looked down. They were all cut up. My shoes were all cut up. Oh. She said, I know who did that. I cried to my grandma. My grandma said, oh. She took the same paper that they were wrapped up in originally, and she wrapped up those cut up shoes nicely. She said, go give it to her. She said, so I walked outside. I said, Natua. No answer. Natua, I got something for you. "What's that?" she said. She could hear her in her tent. "Come out here, I got something for you." Her Natua came out. My grandma said, I held that little package behind my back and I said to her, "You know, Natua, yesterday I don't want to give them shoes to you. But today," she said, "I changed my mind. You could have them." And she gave those shoes to Natua. She told me that story. She said at the end of the story, "You know," she said, "Natua and me, we're good friends all our life. We're just like that," she said. So what does that story mean? Lots of stuff in that story. Lots of spiritual knowledge. Lots of ways of being with each other. It's been wonderful to be with you, my family, all of you. I thank you all. Mussy bucket.
Thank you so much for that wonderful talk. There is one more question in the chat box, if you have time for one more question.
Sure, I'll make time.
Okay. It says, the injustice you spoke of regarding indigenous women being kidnapped and killed was so very distressing. Knowing that mothers are the first educators of families, what can individuals, communities, and institutional systems, nationally or globally, do to address these unjust crimes against the beloved mothers and women of our human family?
That's just a small question. Well, I can tell you what people are doing. They're becoming much more cognizant, first of all, of the situation. For many years, people didn't realize that this was going on. A friend of mine by the name of Christy Belcourt, and you can Google her name, she's done a lot of work to raise consciousness here in Canada about these missing, presumed murdered women. And that she had an art exhibition, and every community she went to, she would ask the people who had lost their loved ones to do these beautiful beaded vamps, you know, for moccasins, to do this beadwork. And this raised consciousness amongst all kinds of people. Beautiful exhibition. And in fact, I think the exhibition itself, there was over, in the end, I think there was well over 1,000 pairs of these beautiful beaded moccasin vamps. I think it did tour into, I think, the States on the eastern seaboard and then on the west. So that's one way in which we can be of assistance and of service to the people in that way. And then another thing that's going on to raise consciousness is amongst the men. I think that the older men who are in their 30s are trying to teach the younger men that in the traditional setting, men were always the protectors, taking care of the women and the children, making sure that they're protected from all harm. And there's a friend of mine over in British Columbia. He started what they called the Moose Hide Project. And he takes this little square, I think it's 2 by 1, a little square piece of moose hide, which if you smell it, it smells smoky, it smells like home. And he invites young people, young men, who want to be known as a protector, that they would wear this on their shirt, this little piece of moose hide, they pin it on. And when there are large gatherings, and where indigenous women will be there and they would be vulnerable, they would look around in the crowd, and if this man is wearing this little piece of material, this little piece of moose hide, they know that he is watching out for them. And so the tide is turning. Men are starting to take responsibility to take care of the children. And also, as women, we're training the younger generation to protect themselves, not to find themselves amongst the ungodly, or to put themselves in harm's way by going to these situations where, you know, they could be harmed. So those are two ways. I think in terms of the Baha'i community, we can always accompany any of the people who are associating themselves with this kind of protection, and also be prepared to hear the hearts of people who have lost their girl children, those that are grieving, those that don't know whether or not their daughters are alive or not. There's a lot of human trafficking out of Canada, as well as in the United States. So those are two very solid things that if we know about it, like when I had the beating, for the beating of the vamps to raise awareness, I think there was only 3 of us indigenous women there. All the rest that were sewing, and there was one man that was sewing as well, were all non-indigenous people. That's how you can, you know, raise awareness. Any other questions? Or I always preface this, you know, I didn't say it today. I can only answer the questions that I can, and those that I can't, I won't. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much for that wonderful talk, and for staying with us well past the time we asked you for. We'd like to invite everyone to come back next week when our speaker will be Jim Malarkey, and his topic is restorative justice. The Zoom link you used this morning, you can use to join any of our Sunday morning programs. They are every Sunday morning at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So please consider coming back and joining us again. At this time, we will conclude the program with a closing prayer.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandra.
Trespasses, I've covered my face with shame in thy presence, and have burdened my back before thee, have intervened between me and thy beauteous countenance. I am aware, O Lord, that my trespass thou forgivest me not, who is there then to grant pardon? And if thou hast no mercy upon me, who is capable of showing compassion? Glory be unto thee, thou didst create me when I was non-existent, when I was non-existent. Glory be unto thee, when I was non-existent, when I was non-existent. Thou didst create me, thou didst nourish me, thou didst create me, thou didst nourish me. Glory be unto thee, when I was non-existent, when I was non-existent. Glory be unto thee, when I was non-existent. Thou didst create